to regain their property. What was the answer of the Israelis? The answer of the Israelis was no. They will not permit single Arab to return, and they will not give them back their property. But we can do the Arabs. If you have a right and nobody is ready to give it to you, so the only solution is force.
Ask this man, when does he think he'll go back to Palestine?
Nasser's views were echoed by Palestinian refugees who believed liberation was close at hand.
في أقرب وقت إن شاء الله يعني خلال الصيف هذا
He's hoping to go back to Palestine this very year. How does he think he's going to do that? كيف تظن أنك ستعود إلى فلسطين؟ كيف تظن أنك ستعود إلى فلسطين؟
في طريق التحرير.
He is going to liberate Palestine. How is he going to liberate it? Well, with force of arms or how? كيف يمكنك تحرير فلسطين يا ترى بطريق السلاح؟
بطريق السلاح نعم.
Yes, by force of arms.
The revolutionaries of Fatah, led by Yasser Arafat, found refuge and support within Syria, viewed as one of the most hardline regimes in the region at the time. And it was Syria that brought matters to a head in 1967.
سوريا بدأت تصرخ أيام صلاح جديد بأن الإسرائيليين يستعدون.
Syria began to cry wolf, claiming that Israel was about to wage war against it, and the Soviets concurred. So Nasser sent an Egyptian military delegation to the Golan that studied the situation and returned with the view that war was not in the offing. But then the Soviets repeated their claims of a coming war.
With the mantle of leader of the Arab world firmly upon his shoulders, President Nasser found it difficult to step back from the escalating tensions in the region. In May 1967, he requested the withdrawal of United Nations observers from Sinai and closed the Suez Canal to Israeli shipping. To Israel, these moves were tantamount to a declaration of war. With conflict imminent, Arab leaders attempted to close ranks. King Hussein of Jordan, who had been the target of accusations and insults by Egyptian state media, made a hasty reconciliation with Nasser.
Letting bygones be bygones was a means of escaping the insults. Egyptian media perfected personal attacks on His Majesty. But the euphoria of the reconciliation and path to war was soon transformed into weeping, which has continued to this day.
A frenzied Arab world waited for the outbreak of war. As in 1948, expectations of an Arab victory and the destruction of Israel were high. The reality proved very different. In June 1967, in a matter of hours, Israel decimated the Egyptian Air Force. Israeli ground troops seized the Sinai Peninsula, overran Syria's Golan Heights, and occupied East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza. The Arab world was shocked and stunned. The Arabs lost what remained of Palestine, and even more Palestinians were forced to flee their homeland. Fatah felt vindicated. The Arab states had yet again proved incapable of defeating Israel. With the Arab regimes in disarray, the path now lay open for the Palestinians to fight for themselves.
كانت مؤثرة جدا ولكن كانت حافز كبير إنه لابد من التعويض.
The defeat in 1967 was very painful, but at the same time, it was a great incentive for us to work harder and achieve something.
After the war, I used to make my way from the Lebanese border to Syria onto Jordan. I was never questioned. My car was full of weapons. The Arab armies were defeated, broken. We used to go to the Golan to gather weapons left by the retreating Syrians. There was a state of utter destruction, in which the Palestinians, whose cause it was, rose and took action.
Arafat, traveling incognito, made his way into the occupied West Bank in an effort to organize resistance. But the Israelis were close on his heels.
كان عندنا مش أقل من 500-600 فدائي بالضفة الغربية.
We had at least 500 to 600 members in the West Bank. In about 15 days, Israeli Defense Minister Dayan managed to capture about 300 of them, and everything fell apart. I remember Arafat being in the West Bank at the time, traveling under assumed names and having to escape.
In September 1967, Arab leaders met in Khartoum to define a clearer and more uncompromising stance to Israel. They issued what became known as the three no's. No peace with Israel, no negotiations with Israel, and no recognition of Israel. Chastened by the 1967 defeat, President Nasser made a political U-turn and embraced Fatah.
ومنا من كان ناصريا وأصبح قال فيش هناك حزب ناصر قلت يا سيادة الرئيس أنا ناصر.
A group of us in Fatah went to Egypt and we finally met with Nasser. I told him I was a Nasserist. I said we are a group of young men who believed in their God and country and were intent on liberating it. He said Egypt would from now on share everything with us.
Egypt began providing training and support for Fatah's guerrillas on the condition that operations not be mounted from Egyptian territory. Jordan quickly became the springboard of attack. The government in Amman could only stand by and watch. In March 1968, Palestinian guerrillas attacked a bus, killing 2 Israelis. Defense Minister Moshe Dayan vowed to teach the Palestinians a lesson. The target was the Jordanian village of Karame in the Jordan Valley, which had become a Fatah stronghold. Some 15,000 Israeli troops were mobilized and took part in the attack. The Palestinian defenders put up a stiff resistance. Jordanian army and artillery support proved crucial, inflicting heavy casualties on the invading Israelis. But not all Palestinian factions had favored a fight. Some had withdrawn from Karame on the eve of the battle, leaving only Arafat's Fatah in the field.
The Arab nationalist movement believed it was a mistake for a guerrilla force to face the enemy head-on, and therefore withdrew its fighters from Karame. But Arafat took into account the popular reaction to such a confrontation and the support the Fidaiyin would gain in its aftermath.
قلت لهم شيء. إحنا كأمة عربية.
The Jordanian chief of staff and the commander of the Iraqi forces tried to convince me to withdraw from Karama.
خلينا نصمد فيها. وخلينا نستشهد فيها.
I told them after the defeat of 1967, we took an oath to fight to the very end, and even if it meant martyrdom.
The Israeli army defeated the Palestinians at Karame.